Okay. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to this next department chairs conversations put on by Tipsy Math. I'm Michael Dorf at Brigham Young University. I am the Director of Strategy and Implementation at Tipsy. And I wanted just to give an announcement that we have an upcoming event that's this summer. Is a Tipsy MAA SIAM Data Science Interdisciplinary Workshop for faculty. That's in June. It's an in-person event, and the application deadline is coming up in about 10 days, the end of this month. I put something in the chat that I will send that has a link to more information about that. So if you know anybody, if you or people in your department who are interested in learning more about data science and making it into an interdisciplinary activity, look at the website and consider applying. Okay, with that, I'll turn the time over to Kate and Matt.
Great. So can everybody hear me okay? Good. Okay, I just stuffed my earbuds in. So I'm going to very briefly introduce our two main speakers. They'll just flow one into the other, and then I'll quickly introduce Tarina Lewis, and then we will go to the promised breakout session. So very quickly, our first speaker is going to be Bo Hammer, who's the Executive Director of the Institute for Mathematical and Statistical Innovation. But Bo comes from IMSI after 10 years at the American Institute of Physics, where he was a founding and interim executive director of the API Foundation. And he also led API's major anti-racism initiative that addressed underrepresentation of African Americans in physics and astronomy. And that's what he's going to talk to us about. And Kate Marley is professor of biology at Duane University, and she's a major contributor to the Pulse community. And Pulse seeks to help the life sciences departments at all institutions of higher education align with national education reform initiatives so that they can develop inclusive, student-centered, and effective evidence-based teaching and learning in order to cultivate the development of scientists who reflect the diversity of American society. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bo to get us started. And somebody is not muted.
Let me share my screen. Can everybody see that? Can you see my presentation?
Yes,
Great.
I see. Okay. Well, actually, I see both your presentation and your sort of notes. So
Not quite sure how to do that. Well,
I think you have to share the other screen when that happens.
Oh, okay. Let me try again. Sorry.
Okay.
Huh.
Well, right now, we only see your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah. If you do play from the start, but you may not see your notes. Oh,
all right.
Weird.
Back to your notes.
Huh.
It's all right.
No, we just see the next slide. It's okay.
Yeah, it's just the next slide. There's no like big reveal or anything. So
and it's too small for me to read anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so let me get started. So typically I spend about an hour going through the entire Team Up report, but that's widely available online, and I think you all might have gotten some links to the report. But what I really want to do is discuss a major takeaway from the report, and that's the necessity of and the importance of demographic data. And I just realized in looking at the materials that you distributed that this should dovetail quite nicely on what Kimmy talked about last time. So what I want to do is talk about the case that we made for action to the AIP Board of Directors to fund Team Up and basically invest in all the subsequent work that they've been doing. And really the entire Team Up process, from our original proposal to the findings and recommendations in the report, were driven by data. And really important, particularly coming from the physics community, which tends to think very highly of its abilities even outside of physics. We really learned and demonstrated that involving social scientists in projects like this is essential, incredibly important. They were, in fact, the major contributors to the research that's behind the Team Up study. But it all started with data that AIP is collecting really for decades, going back at least into the mid 50s, that's done by AIP's Statistical Research Center. And this is just a screenshot from their homepage, which I'm showing because it really, to me, demonstrates the importance of not only collecting data, but making it easily accessible. And that's something I'll come back to a lot. So these boxes below just sort of show how AIP, how the Statistical Research Center has summarized their data into various important categories. And then looking at this category on underrepresented groups, if you were to click there, this pops up, and these are some reports that are relevant to what I'll be talking about today, that they've produced some nice infographics and more in-depth reports on. So this is just for illustration purposes to show you how AIP has organized its data. And then the American Physical Society, which is AIP's biggest member society, has also done a lot of work themselves on summarizing data across a lot of different areas, women and groups historically underrepresented in physics. And they have some good resources on their site as well. So what I want to do next is sort of summarize, using the data we had access to in 2017, 2016, summarize the case that we presented to AIP's board to fund Team Up. Within the physics community, this chart is very famous because it shows bachelor's degree production from 1955 until the most recent data available. And this is from annual surveys of physics department chairs who have, in the culture of physics now within departments and chairs, that they, at extraordinarily high numbers, answer AIP's annual survey about what's happening in their department, including degree production at all levels. And so in the late 90s, around 1999, the physics community looked at this data, and obviously in the late 90s, there's a big problem. Bachelor's degree production across all demographics was at, was at an historical low, or at least recent history. And the physics community set about a community-wide program working with departments, organizations like the Society of Physics Students, the National Professional Societies, to address this problem. And they succeeded in doubling the number of bachelor's degrees produced in about 14 years. That was huge. That was a really big deal. And this just shows how I'm sorry about this graph. It's horrible. I didn't make it. But there's one black line that shows the growth in physics from 1995 to 2018 approximately, and makes that comparison to all bachelor's degrees, which is the other black line, showing that physics was doing relatively not only well for physics, but really well across a lot of other fields. So that was good news. But then what we did is sort of looked over this period of dramatic growth and said, well, what's happening with African Americans over this period? And the data were not great. So this next chart shows the growth in bachelor's degrees awarded to African Americans at all colleges in the US from 95 to 2017 or so. The bold blue line is African Americans bachelor's in all STEM degrees, and the bold red line below shows how the bachelor's degree production in terms of percent change from as in comparison. And you can see that physics is not doing well. And this is over this really overall dramatic growth period. So to us, in making this proposal for Team Up, this was the first kind of alarm bell. I mean, we kind of had a sense, of course, that African Americans were underrepresented in physics, but we didn't know that it was this bad, particularly in this period of growth overall. And just to break out those data in a little more detail, from 99, which was sort of the nadir of physics bachelor's degrees, until 2017, the orange line shows the percentage of physics degrees going to African Americans, and that's hovering somewhere between 3 and 4% or so. And then the blue line are the absolute numbers. And the three really important takeaways from this is that nationally, fewer or about 300 out of about 9,000 bachelor's degrees are going to African Americans. And so if you sort of spread that out among the 800 or so bachelor's degree granting physics departments in the US, that's way less than one bachelor's degree going to an African American per department. So that was another alarming point. And so that was basically the case that we took to AIP's board. And the conclusion that we made was that in the late 90s, while the physics community successfully set about to double the number of bachelor's degrees over the same period, the degrees going to African Americans across all majors was increasing, in fact, at a higher rate than the general population, but and even in STEM fields, but over the same period, the percent and number of African Americans earning bachelor's degrees in physics, depending on the year, had either stagnated or declined. And then we put this in further context, looking at the experience of African Americans in the US as being really distinct and different enough compared to other historically underrepresented groups that we propose that having sort of a laser focus in this project on African Americans was really the important approach we should take. The AIP board agreed, and I won't go through this charge because I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, but they said, go ahead and study the problem, write a report, and make recommendations, which is what we did. That resulted in the team up report. This is the cover. The title is "The Time Is Now, Systemic Changes to Increase African Americans with Bachelor's Degrees in Physics and Astronomy," and that came out in January of 2020. And the summary, which I will read because I think it's profoundly important, was this: the persistent underrepresentation of African Americans in physics and astronomy is due to the lack of a supportive environment for these students in many departments, and to the enormous financial challenges facing them and the programs that have consistently demonstrated the best practices in supporting their success. Solving these problems requires addressing systemic and cultural issues and creating a large-scale change management framework. And so again, all of this was backed up by the data that AIP had been collecting, but then an extensive data-driven research process or program over the 2 years of Team Up. And then we laid out a bottom line goal, which was to double the number of physics and astronomy bachelors earned by African Americans within the decade, which means approximately 500 African American bachelor's degrees in physics per year by the year 2030. So the important takeaways here for this group are that these data and also the infrastructure to access them predated any community desire to act on these data, meaning AIP had been doing this for decades and the information was there waiting for somebody to take action. There was easily accessible demographic outcomes data over decades, and these were essential for quantifying what we, in quotes, knew to be true. And that having these data available from the professional societies also sends a message of transparency and accountability. And I think this is a really important point, which I think makes it somewhat distinct, and I'll come back to this in a second, from having data available, say, from NCES or IPEDS like Kimmy was talking about last time. Because these outcomes data are essential for the community to understand where it is now and to provide a baseline for goal setting. In other words, where do we want to be in the future, by when, and critically, it's important for the professional communities, in my opinion, to hold themselves accountable for progress with respect to things like recruiting and, importantly, retaining individuals from underrepresented groups. And so, interestingly, there's this chart, which is available, I believe, at the APS website, which was intended to compare physics, which is the bold red line depressingly down near the bottom, but it also shows bachelor's degree percentages earned by African Americans in mathematics, which is the green line somewhere in the middle. And just a quick look at this line shows that things might be just as bad for mathematics in terms of the trends as they continue to be for physics. And so I think, the obvious question is what's causing this decline in bachelor's degrees going to African Americans in the US. So a few final thoughts. I thought Kimmy's presentation on the data from NCES was helpful and very good introduction to the resources available. But to me, there's a remaining question about the ease of accessibility of these data from NSF, the extent to which the math community is aware of their existence, and then important issues around transparency and accountability, meaning within the math community, meaning the extent to which the math community is collecting, owning, and being accountable for the stories that these data tell us. And so, perhaps there's a role to be played in this context by one or more of the math and statistics professional societies. Just a quick acknowledgement to the Team Up Task Force. Here we are, and this was our group. And that's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Bo. Okay, we'll go straight over to Kate. That's perfect.
All right. I'm also going to share my screen. Let me see what happens when I do that. All right, hopefully you're able to see that. And now I've lost all of you. So,
We're still here.
You're still there. Okay, we'll just be assuming that you're still there. And now I've lost my presentation screen as well. Hang on just a moment. Okay.
Oop, see it.
Everybody sees it? Okay, great. All right. So, so I'm coming to speak and representing PULSE, which stands for Partnership for Undergraduate Life Sciences Education. And my charge was to talk about what structures can support and encourage action. And PULSE really focuses our efforts at the department level. So that's what I'll talk today about, what we are doing, and also some of our collaborations. PULSE was launched in 2012 in a collaboration between NSF, NIH, and Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And their mission was really to stimulate and support change at the department level. When we were initially brought together, they talked about how trillions had been spent on trying to train individual faculty to be better teachers and support students better, but there really hadn't been any measurable impact on the leaky pipeline as they talked about it. And that strikes me as being similar to the missing millions that that I read about in the physics report and have heard about elsewhere. So those organizations were trying to shift their focus, at least with the PULSE group, to supporting departments. And initially, we were guided by a report written by AAAS called Vision and Change in Undergraduate Education that was written in 2011. It now, there's been lots of reports since then, and we embrace all of those as well. There are currently 60 PULSE fellows that are from all different types of institutions that have life science programs. And PULSE supports departments through 3 programs that we run. And then the website is there if you wanted to see more information. So the 3 programs are our ambassadors program, our recognition program, and then regional networks. The regional networks provide workshops that small teams of faculty and administrators can come to and spend time together moving through an agenda that helps them develop shared goals and an action plan. The ambassadors program is really about going in to help departments that are having trouble working effectively together. And the team of ambassadors will lead these intensive workshops that are about teaching facilitative leadership. They will work the group through developing shared goals and then an implementation plan. And then they'll follow up over the course of the next few years to see what other support they need in carrying out their transformations. The recognition program provides tools so that departments can determine how far they've gotten, how well they've done. And the main set of tools are a set of rubrics, which I'll share in a moment. If a department is officially seeking recognition, then they complete the rubrics, they have a site visit evaluation, and then they receive recognition for their achievements and some extensive feedback. And they're awarded a progression level based in a program that was initially inspired by the LEED Environmental Building program. So departments can engage with Pulse at any of these different programs, depending on what the needs are of their particular department. And we do have programs that will work with us through one program and then move into another program, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. So the self-assessment tool is what we call the Pulse rubrics. It's really a set of 6 rubrics with 78 criteria. So they're really extensive. They are looking at evidence-based practices, the climate for excellence in teaching and learning, and then successful support of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The whole focus really is about supporting the success of underrepresented groups. In biology, David Asai recently wrote an article. He's the director of Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and he wrote an article where he talked about the urgency of supporting people excluded due to ethnicity or race, the acronym being PEERS. And so that's what's generally being used in biology right now. There are 6 Pulse rubrics. They cover curriculum alignment, assessment, faculty practice, and faculty support, infrastructure, which spans both physical and personnel infrastructure, climate for change, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's also a snapshot rubric, which gathers 21 of the items from the other 6. And really, that's a good place to enter into the rubrics. Tackling all 78 criteria from the other 6 is pretty overwhelming. I will emphasize that the most important feature of using the rubrics is to catalyze discussion and to develop consensus scores for a department. What we found is that departments don't really represent accurately what it is that they're doing, or reliably what they're doing, unless they come to consensus as a group around which level of achievement they've mastered. I included the Pulse website with the rubrics, and they're available for anyone to download. We ask for your email address and institution just so we can track who's using them. We know from the past 10 years working on this program that the recognition program and the rubrics in general are able to detect what departments change over time, and then also the key features that departments really seem to need. So I thought I'd share those, and that way departments and department chairs can think about which of these you've got in place and what's not quite there yet. We did, like Bo said, we actually engaged some social scientists and carried out a pretty thorough validation about the ability of the rubrics to evaluate all different institution types. But the 3 key pieces that departments really needed for transformation are an institutional culture that values excellence in teaching and learning. A department emphasis on assessment was really important, but also difficult to find, and a department champion who actively supports the work and really kind of drives the process. We have been most recently collaborating with Amatic, and Pulse is happy to share Word versions of our rubrics. So those would be available to anyone that would want them. We have a Creative Commons license on them, and we are anxious for students to be well supported. So those are available. So with Amatic, we shared the rubrics, and they have an NSF funded Teaching for Prowess program, where they are developing rubrics for their member institutions and also a recognition program. So Teaching for Prowess is what they call their program, and their website is listed here. So perhaps you all know all about this already, but I'm going to share it anyway. They modified our rubrics to be much more compatible with Amatic objectives. And they split it into a different organization of 7 rubrics. I imagine that these would be much more directly relevant to mathematics than the Pulse rubrics, even though they're not, at least not all of them are specific to life sciences. These have not been validated to the extent that the Pulse rubrics have, but I still think that departments would find them a little bit more relevant. They call their set of rubrics the Vision and Change Catalyst tool, and they cover a slightly different scope, each of these. They are also working on a snapshot rubric that hasn't been posted to their website yet, but like for the Pulse rubrics, I think the snapshot rubric is most likely to be the best entryway into using the rubrics with your department. The power of the rubrics really comes in catalyzing department discussion, and using the rubrics helps to focus the discussion around a single criteria at a time. And then because each criterion lists achievement levels and what those look like, it does also help to enable departments to focus and create discrete plans for implementing. Prowess, or Teaching for Prowess, also has a guide for developing that departmental consensus. And again, that's really essential. Departments that don't establish consensus don't really identify their what they're doing. What I love about this particular place on their website is that they provide an FAQ on how to develop consensus, strategies for big and small departments, how to start the discussion. So it's an enormously valuable tool. And then I just wanted to share a couple of rubrics, not that we would work through them, but I wanted to just show you how they look. This particular one is about active and collaborative learning, and it's from the instruction rubric. And then, so each rubric has a criterion description and then a context, which provides instructions on how to interpret the rubric. And then again, the descriptors of the levels of achievement. Programs that are engaged in the recognition programs, departments engaged in the recognition programs also write out a justification explaining why they chose the level they did. That's optional when you're just using it for conversation with your colleagues. I wanted to show one more, and this particular rubric item, and these are, by the way, from the Amatic rubrics. This one is about a recommendation that departments review academic policies and modify them through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion of underrepresented groups. And what I like about this one in particular is that the context section provides a lot of resources for departments wanting to get more information about how they might undertake this work. That is the case with most of the rubric items, is that they do have extensive resources listed to facilitate departments moving their programs forward. And that is the end of what I was hoping to show.
So first of all, I'd like us all to thank our speakers. So virtual claps. Thank you both also for being incredibly disciplined. So that was, and I wonder also, Julie, could you also pin Tarina? And while you're doing that, I'll just introduce her. So Tarina Lewis is the AMS Associate Executive Director for Meetings and Professional Services, and she has won the 2022 Stephen Shabazz Teaching Award from the National Association of Mathematicians, NAM. Congratulations, Tarina, recognizing her work developing mathematical talent in underrepresented undergraduate students and encouraging them to pursue mathematical careers. So thank you very much for joining us, Tarina. Tarina's just going to reflect on what has been heard, and then we're going to slide into breakout groups, which you will be able to choose from. So I'll put in the chat what the great breakout groups would be while Tarina shares her thoughts with us.
So I'm kind of long-winded, so I may not be, I may not stick to the plan like Kate and Bo did. No, I'm just joking. But thank you so much for having me here in this space. This has been great for me to listen to. I haven't necessarily heard presentations about Pulse or Team Up, but I have read through some of the documents of some of the Team Up document, and it's very impressive. I think one thing we should be thinking about as we think about the work for mathematics and what could we do as a community to organize to address some of the systemic challenges that we face in our discipline. We could take the approaches that we've seen here and possibly modify it just a little bit and try to think about how we can do a better job with supporting especially African-American students and mathematicians, but underrepresented mathematicians and students in general. So I think that in the breakout rooms, we have 5 of them set up, and they have different focus, but we have 31 participants. So I think we should be able to fill up those breakout rooms. And while we're in the breakout rooms, just try to think through strategically how we could work together as the mathematics community to organize. And so that's all that I have. We have the 5 breakout rooms. One is going to be led by Bo Hammer, and he'll be speaking about the Team Up report. Kate Marley will be speaking about Pulse. Abby Herzig will be speaking about her work with TIPSY and the work on beams. I'll be in a breakout room to talk about professional societies and what we can do in this effort. And Kate and Matt will be available to talk about department or college level change.
Okay, thank you so much, Tarina. And if you're curious about how the breakout rooms is sort of, do you want to hear more about what physics, or do you want to discuss what physics did? Do you want to discuss the next level, which is sort of what biology has done in creating the rubrics, and then hear the beginnings of what math is doing with Abby, and otherwise more of a free form conversation with Tarina and Matt or Matt and me. So the link, there's a link in the chat for you to do your reflections. Each group has a page inside of that Google slide, and you can make more slides or ignore it completely. Either one is fine. And I think Julie's going to make our breakout rooms. And I think if we go for about 15 minutes, it'll give us a chance to then come back and have a little bit of a reflection. Does that sound about right to everybody? Okay, so let me see. We're just wait. Oh, the breakout rooms exist. So off you go. So Julie, will you stay here and help anybody who's not able to choose their own breakout room? Because sometimes that happens.
Yes.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. everybody. So thank you, everybody. It's nice to have everybody back in the room together. We had a productive discussion in the reflection on department and college level. I'm wondering if we could just ask each group to just give a 1-minute summary of what was discussed in their group. That could either be the group leader or it could be somebody within the group, and I'll let that, we'll just go in order. So Bo, in your group, anybody?
Yeah, we talked sort of a little bit about the data and what happened within the physics community, at that low point in bachelor's degree production, and what the committee did, or what the physics community did to address that, and then rolled the discussion over into, despite these successes, why didn't African Americans, why weren't they brought along in these successes? And then the discussion from there went to the challenges and opportunities in having a professional society-led effort to do this kind of data collection, and the transparency and communication strategies and accountability that goes along with that.
Are you ready for me to go next?
Oh, sorry, I should have said
Sorry,
done.
I was muted. Sorry, my
Oh.
bad. Go ahead, Kate.
Our group talked mostly about the logistics of gathering energy among biologists to form an organization like that and to do the work. And so we talked a little bit about how the group was formed and motivated, how we focus our energy, what are the sticking points with faculty and departments that really push back, and how we've worked on overcoming that. So it was a logistical type conversation.
Super. Tarina?
All right. Anyone from my group wants to speak? No. All right. Of course, we spoke a little bit about the AMS task force report, and what the AMS has done on the governance side and the staff side to work through some of the recommendations on the task force report. Then we spent some of our time discussing the Inclusive Graduate Education Network Alliance, that's IGEN, and the AMS interest in becoming an IGEN Alliance partner.
Super. Abby, are you still here? There you are.
Excuse me, no one joined my breakout room, so I talked to
Oh.
myself for 15
That
minutes.
was a terrible loss for all of you. Abby, do you want to just say, I think we didn't do youth service because we didn't really explain what Beams was. So do you want to just say in a few sentences what that is about?
Sure. TIPSY has taken on trying to adapt some of the materials that the AAAS developed in its Sea Change program to develop a framework for departments to do a self-assessment, similar to what we heard about in the PULSE program, but a different model of self-assessment, to identify what their practices and policies are that have an impact on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then to develop action plans based upon what they learn in their self-assessment. So TIPSY has been leading this effort to build that kind of an assessment tool within the mathematical sciences. And it should be posted on the website soon.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And then the last group, anybody from our group want to report out? Okay, in the interest of time, I will just say, so right off the bat, we talked about how this fits into program review and sort of summarizing a lot of comments on how this can be used to make program review really a valuable exercise rather than just one that we're marching through because that's the way they told us to march through it. Also, some really great recommendations on how TIPSY could help with data, not data collection, but once you have the data, what are great questions to ask? Then what data do you get? Then once you've got that data, working groups that could help you work on it. I think that actually got my mind over a hurdle that we were struggling with on that kind of a workshop. So thank you, Beth, for that recommendation. And we also talked about the need to ask more of our societies in terms of making data clear, as Physicssta has done, so that we don't have to hunt so hard for it. Even though Nimi taught us all how to do it, sometimes we just need to grab it and be able to point to it. And I think it shows a willingness of the community to see the reality of the situation and thereby seeing what people are experiencing on some level. So I think I'm going to leave it there to make up for running over last time. I will let you all have 2 minutes to before you run to your next Zoom meeting. But thank you for joining us. This was a really rich conversation and I enjoyed it very much. I hope it was useful. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Tarina.